In today's video, we're going to be checking out the brand new DC Collectibles Superman the Animated Series. This is set number 1, Superman and Lois Lane. Currently, I've just got the figures standing on their stands just to help me keep the figures standing while we get some measurements going. Lois Lane stands at about 5, close to about 6 inches. She actually is about 5 3/4 of an inch tall. Meanwhile, the Man of Steel is about 6.5 inches tall. Like I mentioned, they are on their display stands, and one thing that's cool about these display stands is that they're brand new. Yes, the bottom half, or at least the part that the figure is going to stand on, is exactly the same as what we've seen before, where we've got the front half or side and 3/4 turn here of the character Lois Lane. What's interesting though is that, and what's different, is the clip. They've changed the clip system, and I'm assuming this is probably going to be the way that most figures, if not all the figures, are going to be presented moving forward. If you remember, let me just move Lois Lane's arm out of the way here. Just move the clip. If you remember before, the clip was simply just a part that slid onto the post, and it was just basically like a manual clamp. You basically just opened and closed the clamp on its own. Now what they've done is they've changed it to something that looks like this, where it's actually got a spring clip. So it keeps the figures much more secure, and it guarantees the clamp is going to clamp around them. It's not 100% perfect though, because I still find I'm kind of forcing. There's not really a lot of areas where I can kind of hold it, so I'm holding it from the side, and then I have to try my best to get the figure's waist in there and close off the clamp. It still also means that the figure stands really far back on the display stand. What you can kind of do is bring the clip forward, and then just kind of twist the figure, which ultimately means the figure gets a little bit more of a footing on the stand, but then you've got this big noticeable kind of clamp piece sticking out from the side. It's a vast improvement than what we had before. I still think there's room for improvement, maybe with the way that this swings out. I feel like this should almost be able to swing itself outward, but it doesn't seem like that be the case. It does seem like it wants to be able to swing, but you can see the way it's molded, there's no way it would. The only thing I would have changed is probably by having the clamp part, the part actually on the end here, rather than on the side. If it wasn't on the end, then you would be able to rotate the clamp outward, or the figure would be further out on the display stand. Judging though by the way it's constructed, it doesn't seem to be the case, but doesn't it almost look as if this part here can swing outward? Obviously that not be the case though. So about that, that's the only thing I would change to it. They've also put a little back piece on there as well, that's also adding to the stability of the figure, but you know, it's better than what it was. I think there's still room for improvement, in all honesty. One thing though is that the clip stays in place. It doesn't slide up and down like we've seen with some of the previous figures. This is a vast improvement, and I haven't checked it, but if this is the same post as what we've gotten with the other figures, and simply this is just different, I hope DC Collectibles releases maybe these where you can buy them separately, so that you could theoretically switch out all the older figures that you had on your display with these new clip pieces. Maybe just sell them by the posts and the clips in like a bundle pack, you know, something where you can then swap it out with the ones that are already on your stands. So still, it's a vast improvement from where it was. Could be a little bit better, but again, I appreciate the fact that they're taking some stride with changing out what really wasn't working with the previous figures. Speaking of figures, why don't we have a look at Lois Lane first? And for the most part, I really think she turned out quite well. Paint's very clean. It looks like areas such as her legs are sculpted in the flesh color, so they don't have to worry about painting that and having any imperfections. The color of her flesh tone makes sense. It doesn't look all that pale. It doesn't look too warm. It's just actually the right color for Lois Lane. Face sculpt is good, but I feel like I don't know, like I feel like some of the female figures, they seem to struggle with at times. Like the face sculpt on Lois here is good, but it almost seems too stern. Like she's so serious. From the side, it actually looks a little bit more like Lois than it does from the front. I think the eye portion is pretty good, but I would have favored giving her a more, I don't know, more of a smile on her face rather than such a very serious look on Lois's face. The hair sculpt's good, and actually the hair came wrapped in like a wrap, like a plastic wrap, I guess, to protect the hair. It is a soft rubber, and her outfit is kind of like a sports coat, and then again your white skirts and a pair of purple heels. This figure would not have had proper means to stand. I've tried a couple of times. Not quite. She just really doesn't have enough footprint that attaches itself to whatever you're standing her on, that a display stand definitely would come in handy for Lois Lane. She does come with a series of interchangeable hands. The hands really are not that much different from one another. Like currently, what was in the socket when you get them out of packaging, Lois has like a pair of relaxed palms. But she does basically have like the same sort of hands as replacements as well. Case in point, I'm just going to show you the two hands here. This is one hand. This is an interchangeable hand. Now, I don't really think that there's much difference between this hand and this hand here to warrant why you would get two of basically the exact same hand. Of course, she comes with some other things as well, like hands suited for holding things, but surprisingly enough, Lois nor Superman come with any sort of accessories whatsoever. Like this looks like it could have held a tape recorder or a microphone or something, but unfortunately she doesn't come with anything. Same thing can be said for this hand. She gets a total of 6 extra hands, also hands like closed fists as well. But again, like these little hands here, here's the other one, because you get 2 of these, one on either side. The hand is really not that much different from one another. I would almost argue the point that to give us 2 of these hands, this is the same amount of plastic that could have been used to give us like a tape recorder. And a tape recorder then would have made perfect sense if you're going to give us a hand that looks like this, because she doesn't come with anything. She doesn't come with any sort of accessories whatsoever. Lois Lane's Poseability, by the way, her head rotates left and right. She has a ball joint, actually, so her head moves up and down, too. She has universal joints on the arms, so the arms rotate all the way around. By the way, if you are wondering, this is a softer rubbery plastic. Same thing could be said for the skirt. So it does give you just a little bit of extra wiggle there when it comes to posing the figure. Bend at the elbow, which also allows the forearm to rotate, and also the individual hands rotate and hinge back and forth. She has a waist swivel. I was going to say she doesn't have an ab crunch, but she has a waist swivel. And then her legs go in and out, back and forth. She has a bend at the knee, which I find is really super stiff on this figure. I even question whether there is a hinge, but then I see the back of the figure does have a hinge point, but bending it, boy, oh boy, bending it, I feel like I'm going to break it. Like it's resisting considerably. Not that you would need bends in her legs at all, but if she's got the hinge there, I almost feel like they could have just left it completely off, because it literally, like right now, and prior to shooting this part of the review, trying to bend this leg, it seemed like it just didn't want to bend. And in fact, it felt like I was breaking the peg. So I'm just going to leave it as is. Wonder Woman's a good looking figure. Needed some accessories, especially if she's going to be a reporter for, the Daily Planet. You would think that she would come with something, a tape recorder, a microphone, a camera, something, because she does come with the hands. And this is not the first time we've seen this. Figures coming with hands that look like they're sculpted for something, and yet the figure just doesn't have anything that could fit into their hands properly. At least kudos for the display stand. The display stand is a vast improvement. Now let's have a look at the Man of Steel, which also I've got on his display stand. It's basically the exact same idea, same waist clip, same post. Of course, the turnaround front, side, and 3/4 back turn on Superman. A little bit different than Wonder Woman's. Digging that quite a bit. Superman comes with a fair share of his own interchangeable hands, but once again, no accessories whatsoever. Figure is beautiful, like a really good representation of Superman. I've got a little bit of imperfection there on the belt, a little bit of faux pas there, a little smudgy, a little bit of paint removal. But for the most part, the paint's pretty clean on the figure. Periodically, I will find like there's little scratches to the figure, like where you see these little apparent scratches. I don't know if I'm causing that, but like little scratches seem to appear out of nowhere on these figures. Head sculpt is okay, and I don't know, there's something off on the head sculpt Once again, kind of like Lois, it looks better from the side than it does from the front. From the front, or actually, let's back that one up. From the side, I think it looks good. It looks just like Superman from the cartoon. As you ever so slightly turn the figure, something seems more and more apparently off. And I've been trying to figure out what it is exactly. I think a couple of things. The parts that I think work are the eyes, the hair, and the sculpt of the face. I thought maybe that the face being too broad of a chin, a very squared off chin, made it what was causing the figure not to quite look like Superman. I think what it is that the nose needed to be just a little bit shorter, the mouth needed to be just a little bit more narrower, and I think the mouth had to be a little further up. I feel like the mouth is just a little too far down because Superman has a very predominant chin that it's here in the figure, but it doesn't resonate as much because I think the mouth is too far down on the face. That if you kind of took everything and just slightly moved it up, I think it would look a little bit more like he did from the cartoon. The rest of the figure, though, other than that, it looks great. I like that he's got the elevated Superman emblem on his chest, that it's not simply just painted on, that they've actually sculpted that in. That's a nice touch. The sculpt of the cape is a soft rubber plastic, so again, I like that. Got a little bit of red paint on the back there. Normally, I would say that that's a bit of a mishap, but unfortunately, you're really not going to see it anyways. It's covering it completely. And it's funny that, like, looking at the cape here, it almost looks almost identical to the Justice League Superman that was released many years ago. It almost has almost the exact same sculpting at the top here and a very, very straight, square cape. Other things I would think are maybe a little small nitpicks. The area of the thigh isn't quite the same red as what he gets for the underoos. The red here matches well to the cape, but then here, these are darker red. They look a little off-putting, but from a distance you don't notice it you don't seem to notice it as much. Superman does come with a fair share of interchangeable hands, much like Lois Lane. Currently, he's got a pair of closed fists, but at least his hands range in variety versus Lois Lane's. Like, he does have a pair of gripping hands for holding things. Once again, doesn't come with any sort of accessories. He comes with a pair of, like, a little bit more relaxed hands. Again, for holding stuff, doesn't come with any accessories. And, of course, you have to have Superman with the I'm flying away hand. Don't really need accessories for that, for the nature of what the hand is. Changing out the hands, by the way, as simply as just grabbing onto the forearm here. And just kind of wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. It's a little stiff, actually, to get the hands out of the socket. But try as you might, you can get them out. But they're just very, very difficult. Let me show you, by the way, the very small peg. I get because the forearms taper off. They start broad and they get thinner as they get to the hand portion. Again, it doesn't give you much clearance for changing out the pegs. But unfortunately, by that, the hands are so very thin on pegs that be very careful when you are changing out the hands. As you probably saw with me, changing out the hands can be a little bit difficult. And once again, we just kind of wiggle and pop that back into place. It's best to kind of just do a little bit of a wiggling as you're pushing it through, that you're not adding a lot of stress to that peg. I don't really like changing out the hands, in all honesty. Lois Lane, actually, of the two, seems a little easier to change out the hands, but the pegs are so long on Superman's hands, and you're having to apply so much pressure to get them in there, that I do feel a lot of the times that I'm going to ultimately, well, I'm not going to say the word, but I'm going to ultimately break the hands off. So I would say settle on one hand that you like the most and keep it like that. Don't change it out too often, because changing out these hands are so problematic. Looking at Superman's posability, his head is on a ball joint, hinges up and down. He has, much like Lois Lane, the universal joints on the arms, so the arms hinge out considerably, I might add, to about there. And the arms can also rotate all the way around, but you will find a little bit of fighting here and there, trying to get it around the torso, trying to get it around the cape. It does get the bend at the elbow, which also allows the forearm to rotate. And he has the rotation, and the hands also can hinge back and forth. Doesn't have an upper torso crunch, however, he does have the waist swivel. And much like previous figures that we looked at, his legs hinge outward, as well as a forward back, bend at the knee. Lower leg, by the way, does not rotate, so don't try to rotate it. And he's also got the hinge in the foot. The DC Collectibles Superman, the animated series figure set 1, consisting of Superman and Lois Lane, turned out to be not a bad set. Overall, I'm pretty happy with how the figures turned out, but there are a few little problems here and there that really take a bit away from enjoying this 2-pack a little bit more than what I am. Lois Lane is pretty good, but I kind of wish that her facial expression was a little bit more happy, a little bit more Lois Lane, not as serious as what they ended up giving her. And once again, we get a series of interchangeable hands that leads us to believe that she should have really come with accessories when ultimately she did not. Superman, on the other hand, is a better of the two figures. His face sculpt is better than I think Lois's is, but it could have been tweaked just ever so slightly. The display stands are a nice updated touch. I do like the new waist clips that they have provided. And one of the problems that I'm having with Superman, as I've had with some figures in the past, is changing out hands, which can be a make or break experience, literally, as you might find yourself breaking pegs in the process of trying to change out the hands. Still, for Superman animated series fans, it's a great, nice touch to see that DC Collectibles are now releasing Superman figures along to go with the previously looked at Batman animated series figures. I'm hoping the trend will continue and we'll eventually get ourselves some Justice League figures, and super excited for those as well. In the meantime, today, once again, we're having a look at the DC Collectibles Superman, the animated series. This was set number 1, and this was Superman and Lois Lane. If you guys haven't had a chance yet to subscribe to this channel, hit that little subscribe button down below. You won't miss a beat when it comes to future videos. And if specifically you want to check out some more DC Collectibles animated series figures, there's a playlist on this channel that you can go back and check out those older videos at your viewing pleasure. As always, guys, thanks for watching as you always do. I'll see you next time.